So overmarking crosswalks is going to be a problem. Undermarking crosswalks is a problem. So being very strategic on how you're deploying your resources is really the right mix. So do we have pedestrians using it, or do we want pedestrians to be using it? Are we encouraging them to cross in the correct places? And knowing your audience is a very important part of just making those decisions. So I wouldn't encourage striping every crosswalk through a business district, because then they just become part of the background noise. So identifying the key locations, I think, is really the best method for using your resources.
I might even expand on that a little further and say some of it might also depend on how close that unmarked crosswalk is to a signalized intersection with markings, obviously, or even a stop controlled intersection. And I would say if it's relatively close, I don't want to put a number on it, I would almost consider closing off that unmarked, like just making it curbed all the way through to try to encourage. Obviously, you'd have to do a volume study there too. If there's a lot of pedestrian activity there, then that might not be appropriate. But if there's not much pedestrian activity and it's fairly close to a signalized intersection, then I mean, I'm chiming in with and agreeing with what Chris said, is that I don't think there's necessarily a need to go and mark all unmarked crosswalks. I think they kind of have to be looked at on a case by case basis. So.
Let me expand that a little closer, because there are blocks where there's a lot of vehicle curb cuts, or especially when they're not even concrete curb, but the desirability of building a concrete sidewalk through a vehicle driveway versus, again, the equivalent of an unmarked crossing.
Sure.
Would that be considered just more noise and don't bother?
So in Grand Rapids, it's our standard that you build the sidewalk through the driveway, and that the driveway needs to conform to the requirements for the sidewalk. We give the priority to the sidewalk. Marking those is not something that we typically do, right?
It's an interesting contrast, though, because that drive, putting the sidewalk through the drive creates what you call the disadvantage of a noise, because there's really no other purpose in my mind.
So I would describe it a little bit differently, with the sidewalk being the higher order, and the more vulnerable user. By putting the sidewalk through continuous, there's a regular expectation that as you're leaving the traveled way, you're going to have to cross the pedestrian way, which I see that a little bit different than marking the crosswalks across a road, where we're trying to encourage the specific pedestrian behavior. So you expect it when you leave the roadway, and you should have it measured when you're crossing the actual traveled way.